I'm Faith Knox, and I've been following Baba and trying to love and obey Baba since 1986 or 85, I think. And this is my friend, Barb Jackson, and I told her about Baba at some point. I can't remember when.
I think it was late 85.
Really, it must have been shortly after I found out about Baba, because I was working as a nurse practitioner, and I met Barb through my work, and I must have just spilled the beans very quickly. But my story is this. My daughter, who's also a Baba lover, is Kate Brown. And she had found out about Baba at some point when she was still in high school from reading a book written by Pete Townsend, in which Pete had mentioned that he had a guru named Meher Baba. And Kate was a musician even then. She's still a musician and a music teacher and a church pianist and everything musical. But at that time she had her own little, or was a part of a little rock band, high school rock band, all high schoolers. So she had found this book written by Pete Townsend in which he had mentioned that he had a guru named Meher Baba. Well, that was in the 80s. There was no internet, and we went to the library, we went to the bookstore locally. Nothing about Meher Baba. We did find out later that he was mentioned in an encyclopedia, a major encyclopedia like World Book or something like that. It was incredible that his name and a description of his life and work was in that encyclopedia. But we could find nothing, and she didn't know what to do. My husband at that time was getting ready to go to a meeting in Vancouver, British Columbia, and it happened to fall during her spring break from high school. So he said, why don't you and Kate come and we'll all enjoy Vancouver, British Columbia. Mostly you and Kate, because he would be in the meetings. So he went to the meeting and Kate and I did the town. We walked around and we went into a kind of a hippie, counterculture-like looking bookstore. And just as we walked in the door, right there was a bookcase with The Beloved, How to Choose a Guru, and maybe something else, maybe the discourses, I don't know. But Kate just went wild. She said, Mom, look. So we bought them all. And of course, that was the end of walking around looking at Vancouver. She wanted to go back to the hotel and read. Just read. So anyway, we finished that little vacation, and when we got back to our home in Corvallis, Oregon, she contacted a number that had been written in How to Choose a Guru. It was in Berkeley. I don't know that number, but there was a phone number right there in the front of the book. And she called and found out that there was a Baba group in Portland, which was about 80 miles north of where we were. And so she called that number. She found out what that number was, called, and found out, well, they were having a Baba meeting just in the very near future. So she asked, I don't even know if she could drive then. She said, Mom, will you take me? And I said, well, it's a long ways to go, but sure. So the two of us went to Portland. We found the house, and it was Dale Drager and Bart Spiller's house. And at that time, Margot Drager was not born, wasn't even on the agenda. And Bart and Dale, I think, had already made one trip to India. I know Dale had. And anyway, we go in, and there's a nice group of people, and of course they're talking about Baba and the discourses and the termination of the ego. And I'm looking around and I'm thinking, what kind of crazy stuff is this? So we leave and go home, and of course Kate continues to pursue her finding out more and more about Baba. And it seems to me like we must have ordered more books, and I don't know from where they came, but I remember having a coffee table covered with pamphlets and books about Baba. And she finished high school, and in 1987, my husband and I and Kate, the three of us, made our first trip to India. But before that happened, I had come into a very severe crisis in my work. And I was working in a state penitentiary as a nurse practitioner. And I, along with the doctor that I worked with, came into a question about our treatment of the inmates. And it threw me into quite a crisis about, I'd never been in any trouble professionally or any other way, and I didn't know where to turn. And so one day, shortly after this all kind of erupted, I happened to be in the living room, and I happened to pick up the little pamphlet, Sparks of the Truth. And I just opened it up, and wherever it was I opened, I looked. I don't even remember what it was that I read, but it just went right to my heart. I thought, that's it. So it wasn't too long after that, and after she graduated, that we made that first trip to India. And I was overwhelmed. I did not like it at all. When we got to the Taj Hotel, which was where we stayed, I said to my husband, I said, I don't know what I have gotten us into, but I want on the next plane out of here. Well, it was a long midnight ride through the worst part of Bombay in a non-air-conditioned car, so all the windows were rolled down. The stench and the heat just overwhelmed me, and seeing the people laying in the streets really bothered me. So my husband's name was George, and where we lived in Corvallis, there was a small town about 4 miles west of us called Philomath. And it was maybe a 15-minute drive from our house. And anyway, George just looked at me when I said, I don't know what I've gotten us into, but I want out of here. He looked at me and he says, Faith, we're not exactly in Philomath. Meaning, we didn't just turn around and go home. And I remember saying, all right, but it's got to get better because it can't get any worse. So we go to Pune and we stay a couple of days in the Blue Diamond, and it gets better. And then that was when they had the blue bus that took you from wherever. I mean, there weren't the taxi service then that can remember, where there was a blue bus, but it was not the blue bus, but it was a blue van. We were picked up at the Blue Diamond by this blue van and taken to Mehrabad. And of course, once we got there and I got settled and started going to Mirazad, met Mani and met Mira, had tea at Mira's table, it began to kind of mellow, and I wasn't so distraught, but I was quite distraught for quite a bit of that trip. And I was counting the days to when we were scheduled to leave. And of course, we get home, back to Oregon, back to Corvallis, and I'm just immersed in all this Baba, everything Baba this, Baba that. Kate wanting to go back to Portland to more meetings, and it was just overwhelming. But by then, I think I was beginning to kind of turn the corner. And then Kate went on to graduate, start college, got a nice job. She actually got a job as a travel agent. She went to travel school, became a travel agent with Azumano, which was a travel company in the Northwest at that time. I don't think it's there anymore, but anyway, and our lives went on, and then Kate got married, moved out, and it was just George and I. And more I became convinced that Baba was truly something. And so in 1987, that was when Kate and I and George went to India together. But in 1989, just 2 years later, I was ready to go back. And that time, it was the total opposite. It was, I was in love with India. I was in love with everything Indian. I loved the center. I loved, Mirazad. I loved being out. I was not afraid to be out in the countryside. And so it was just a total 180. And then from there on, I just became more and more involved, and today I'm totally convinced that he is exactly who he said he was and continues to be. So I'm now going on 74. I'll be 74 in about 3 months or so, and I'm just fine. I like living here. I live in Myrtle Beach now, and I don't get to the center very much, but I'm busy, and that's just fine. So at some point early on, very early on, Barb came to me as a patient. I was a nurse practitioner, and I don't remember too much about how we even got on the subject of spirituality. I think probably that's how it started. And I did have a picture of Baba in my office. And so I introduced her to Baba, and then she can tell you the rest.
Well, I believe it was late 1985 when I met Faith, because we had just moved. I had moved in with my then boyfriend and my 3 children, and we made a home together in Albany, North Albany, which is very close to Corvallis, about 10 miles. And one Friday night, I just was fresh out of a divorce of 21 years, and I felt that I was sinking into a very deep hole that I wasn't able to get out of. I was very much depressed, and I didn't know if I was going to make it through the weekend. And my finger just ran down the yellow pages. In those days, that's all we had. And I was so oblivious to anything that I just let my finger run down, and it stopped on her number. And I called her. It had to be 5:30 or 6 on a Friday night. I didn't expect her to answer or anyone to answer, and she did. And I must have mumbled something about I didn't think I was going to make it through the weekend. And she said, well, can you be here in 20 minutes? And I said, I can be there in 10. And that's how it all started. I went to see her as she was a therapist, and I was the client. And her name was Faith Knox at the time, which if you think about Faith Knox, it's hilarious. Baba makes this all hilarious, actually. And I didn't pick up on that until a couple of years later when it hit me on Christmas Eve. Faith Knox, you know, she was right there going to tell me about Baba. So it wasn't a couple weeks or maybe a month or something, and she handed me a copy of Discourses with Baba's picture on it, and I just, nothing was shocking about it, nothing was out of the ordinary. I didn't have to wince at anything or doubt anything. It just seemed pretty normal. And then after she and I had been in that role together, we kind of switched roles, and she helped me through the end of my master's program, and then I actually got to spend a bit of time in her solo practice office as a co-practitioner. So it was very nice. It kind of got me started out in the world. And from then on, I was, and then we parted ways, I think only 6 or 8 months later or something. She was going to go home, and I was going to go out in the world. And that's the way it had to be. That's the way Baba had it planned. That we would only spend a certain amount of time together in that role. But in the meantime, I really discovered Baba and read a lot about him, saw the videos, and but I didn't get to India until 2006. Because as I told people over there who asked me, I said, I think I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off. Until Baba really pinned me down in 2006 and said, you're going to go to India. And the way was just magically paved. It all worked out. But I learned a very hard lesson that Faith had actually warned me on. She said, when you go to India, you want to go see Baba last. Go do your business, your visiting and touring and all this and that before you go see Baba. And then after you've seen him, go directly home. Well, I was going to do this and that and this and that. And Baba made that whole trip so miserable going back from Thailand, from Bangkok, that all of a sudden it dawned on me, well, that was his order. So instead of going directly home, I'd gone on to Thailand. From that moment on, I realized I'll never make that mistake again. And then going to was another miracle that he performed. He was trying to tell me in advance, go directly home after you see me. But instead, my friend Ron and I, Ron came with me on that first trip. We had left the United States with no visas. Now Ron is a seasoned traveler. He's lived in Egypt. He lived in the Middle East. And how in the world we could have left the United States with no visas into India is beyond me. But that's what Baba can do. He can pull the veil where you'll do at his bidding, basically. So we get into Bangkok, and my plan was to go directly there to India first. And we go running over to Air India in the Bangkok airport and get up to the desk and show our passports. And the woman in Indian, broken in English, says, "You're not going to India tonight." I said, "What? We're going to go see Baba." She probably looked at me like I was nuts, you know. And she said, "You don't have any visa." I said, "What? What's a visa?" You know. I mean, just the most poignant stuff. So then we wandered around the Bangkok airport all night, 1, 2, 3 in the morning. I was asking people who were asleep under their little desks, Thai people who probably didn't even speak much English, "Hey, can you give me a visa?" You know, I must have been a crazy woman going around, you know, anything to get to India that night. It wasn't going to happen. Baba was trying to tell me, do your visiting here now, and then go to India. So all of a sudden, about 5, I remembered that my nephew, Ken Baba, actually lived in Bangkok. So I call him up, 5 in the morning, and he goes, "Aunt Barb, I was expecting your call any minute now." And I said, "You were?" Because I had planned to go to India for a couple weeks. I hadn't even planned on talking to him. It's just that the plane went through Bangkok. He said, "I'll be right down." And by this time, I'm almost weeping, you know, because all of a sudden the plans are just gone awry. He says, "Aunt Barb, I'll be right down. I have a new car." And he says, "I'm bringing cold drinks, and I'll be right down to meet you guys. Just go on through customs, and I'll meet you." And so I thought, well, this seems like a miracle to me, you know, whatever. He had told me on the phone, "I have like a month ahead off of teaching because I just had a son born and I have nothing to do." And so I thought, oh, okay, that's fine. He drives up in a brand new red car. Now, nobody in Bangkok, hardly young people, have something like that. They all have scooters and what. I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is okay. We get in, and he says the first thing, you know, we're going to do is go to breakfast, and then we're going down to the consulate and apply for the visa. The visa was going to take 3 weeks. So see, Baba was trying all the time to get me to do this visiting first. But I still had it in my head, oh no, we're going to get to India and then we'll come back and see you then. And of course, when that happened, my sisters were there who have always been down on me, and it was a miserable trip home. So Baba really knows how to put that lesson out there in a most miraculous way. He can control every little detail, every little thing, right down to the eyelash, you know. And but actually the visit in India was very good. I did a lot of reading, and by 2006 most of the mandala, but we did get to see Bao. Ron and I got to sit with him for 4 or 5 hours. I mean, he just wouldn't quit. Pretty soon I was like, wait a minute, you know, don't you have something else to do, you know? No, he didn't seem to have anything else to do. Do you have any more questions? The only one I could really think of was, we just came back from a UFO conference. And I said, Bao, what would Baba say about all these spacecraft that, you know, they talk about, the UFO conferences talk about? And he said, well, he says, they do come to Earth. They come here in the orbit, and they come here a lot, particularly in the time of the Advents, when the Avatar is here. And, but he says they can't survive here. They can't reincarnate here. They can't live here because they're not allowed in yet. they have great intellect, but they don't have the heart developed enough to come in and be here. So that's the way Bao put that. I'm sure there's more to it, but that's the way he put it at that time, and I thought that was very interesting. And then, if I have one more minute, what I understood Baba to say about that, and I don't think Baba commented on that, the UFO situation very much, but at one point I think Baba indicated that they're not from outer space, which makes sense to me because I think they're pretty much of the earth. You know, the Nazis made them, and who knows who all, and that they're still, you know, maybe in Antarctica, who knows. But anyway, so I did ask Bao about that. And, but Bao was a fascinating person. In 2006, he was still very much available and conversant. And so that's how it happened. Then I went back in 2011 and had more wonderful experiences. And that's how it's been for me. Baba has had me under his thumb, literally. I mean, you know, I think if I stray too far, he just appears and kind of takes over, which is his way to do it.
Like in what's happened to say that?
Do we have the time? Well, he made it very clear to me in 2011. I became aware. Now, mind you, I love my sisters. I'm the middle of 3 girls. But I came into a time when it occurred to me that I need to get away from them. Totally. I mean, this was critical. This was something that Baba was setting up, I think. And so I moved away from them. And I went, and it became clear that I was supposed to go to India again. And there was so many obstacles in my mind. Oh, I just can't go. I have this work, that work to do, this meeting, that, you know. One meeting with the state of Oregon on some kind of, by this time I was a counselor, that I was supposed to go be in this meeting in Salem. I was living in Monmouth at the time. And they said, there's no way you can change this meeting date. We'd been waiting for a year for this. There was going to be some kind of a conference thing. And so, you know, I went about my business but I bought my tickets and had my packing started. And then 2 or 3 days before I was to leave, Salem office calls me and she says 3 or 4 times, Barb, I don't know how this happened, but your meeting has been changed till like that was a month later. So I would just get back from India and be able to, and she said 2 or 3 times, you know, this is very official. I don't know how this could have ever happened, but it did. Your meeting is now blah, blah, blah. And it's just uncanny. You know, I was just sitting there like, okay, Baba, you know, when I realized who's pulling all these trains. And I realized the gravity of this. It's so humbling to know that you don't really have to control your own life. That it's kind of out of your hands anyway. And all you have to do is pack, get to the plane, and boy, when it's time to go, you're going. I mean, you are going. Come hell or high water, you're going. And so then I went back that time, and that's the last time I've been back. And it's just such a marvelous, you know, you can't put everything into words. You have to experience it yourself, like Baba says. You have to go through the experience yourself. There's only so much reading, talking, stuff you can do until you have to have these experiences yourself. And then you really know for yourself. So it's been just nothing short of a miracle. And this is why Faith, we lost touch just after she moved to Myrtle Beach here from Oregon. But when I went to India, people started talking about her, and because they knew I was from Oregon, they said, "Oh, do you know Faith Knox?" And I said, "Do I know Faith Knox? Where is that woman?" "Oh, she's in Myrtle Beach." And so then I wrote to her on email and so on and so forth, and then we got back together and in touch, and so every now and then she comes out or I come back or whatever. But she's the one that told me, so that was the chain of events that happened there. It's nothing short of a miracle. I can't put it all into words. I did have a near-death experience that I felt, I think it was probably in the mid-90s, when my son was buying a house in Hood River, and I went up to live with him for about 6 months, kind of running away from issues in my own life. And Hood River is my hometown, Hood River, Oregon. So I moved in with my son, and on New Year's Eve, I thought I was going to die. I went into this kind of a psychic dark hole about 2 or 3 in the morning. And Bobby, my son, was just getting up to go up to the mountain to be a lift driver on the snowpack lift, how you get in the chairs for skiing. And he had just left maybe about 2 or 3 in the morning when I just knew I was going to die. I had felt like this all night, and I curled up in the fetal position and thought, oh, if it'll just happen and I can just go over, I'll be okay. It was just hell. And I closed my eyes, and in front of my eyes it appeared open like a TV screen or something. And here was this beautiful Mack truck, painted purple, a double-decker with alfalfa hay on it. Well, I'm raised on a farm with cattle and orchards, so I know all about alfalfa hay. And here's this fantastic Mack truck with bells and whistles on it, and 2 little guys hop out in white overalls to die for. I mean, they've been ironed, they have embroidery on them, what all. These 2 little guys jump out, and they bring a conveyor belt off of each of the semis. And I mean, they're loaded to top. And this is all very sophisticated and mechanized. The bales of hay start to come down on this conveyor belt. We're talking high tech here. And I'm starting to zero in and look at these bales of hay, of alfalfa, very good grade of alfalfa. And I'm looking, each one of them has a linen piece of, like a label, but it's been embroidered on this beautiful, like Indian linen or something. Beautiful, perfect embroidery. And I'm looking close, and at this, every single bale has the identical thing. And on it is written the word pain, P-A-I-N. Now, it didn't occur to me at that time that they're unloading my pain, but that's what they're doing. Hundreds of bales are just magically coming off these 2 huge semi-trailers. Row after row is coming off on these conveyor, and these 2 little guys in their white overalls, they're just managing everything, and they're just, but it has me occupied because I'm looking at all this action. And I'm thinking, this truck is amazing. I mean, I wouldn't mind driving something like that, and that hay is just to die for. It was in the great big bales, not the little tiny ones. It was the wire string around it, the wire, not the baling string, but the wire. So these are big bales that really men and women can't lift very well. They're big. And I'm just looking at all this detail and all this stuff. And pretty soon they put up the conveyor belts. It's all done. They get in the truck and they're rolling away with the truck. And the screen closes. And before the truck had rolled in, I had seen this little kind of a garden gate across the road. A little beautiful wooden gate. And I thought, oh, if I can just get over there and get through that gate, then I'll be fine. But of course the truck rolled in before I could get across the road. And then I was busy looking at the truck. So by the time the truck rolls away, I'm opening my eyes. I forgot all about getting over to the gate. And I think it was a near-death experience that Baba unloaded a bunch of my pain. I mean bales and bales and bales. And that's another miracle. Because afterwards I felt great. And I called my dear friend. He now lives at Trout Lake, Washington. I'm having a senior moment as to his name, but he's a big UFO guy out in the West Coast. And he has a ranch right up by Mount Adams at Trout Lake. And we were in touch at that time. And I called him. This has to be like 4:30 in the morning or something. But I call him. And he says, Barb, I was waiting for your call. James Gilliland. I said, you were? Do you know the time? He said, I've been awake waiting for your call. And then I knew. I just almost broke down weeping. It's just nothing short of a miracle. That's all it is.
Wow.
Thank you, Baba.
Thank you.